already going? It's already been recording?
Yeah.
You
No, and
edit
I just
all that
started.
out, right?
There you go.
You edit all that out. Alright, so I'm Tony, I'm one of our detectives here. Some of you guys know me. What I'm here to talk to you guys today about is the We Can Help initiative. Has anybody heard of the We Can Help initiative? Besides Jim, you don't know. No. Alright, so basically, what I'm going to talk about today is a new approach to the heroin epidemic. So it's no big secret that the opiate epidemic is something that pretty much affects all of us in one way or another. And I'm going to talk about how, as a community, it impacts us and what we can do to try to improve our approach and what really we're doing at the Elgin Police Department to try to make this better for everybody. So really, I call it a simple thought and a new approach. So heroin is a crime, right? And police address crime. Is that what you would think? What do the police do when they come in contact with someone with heroin? Well, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Thank you, Angie. We arrest them, right? The police's job is to arrest people when they commit a crime, right? I mean, that's traditionally what the police have done. Do you think that the police can arrest their way out of the opiate epidemic? Absolutely not. So I'm big on mindset. When I talk about mindset with officers, I talk about changing the way that we look at things, changing the way that we think about and approach things. And early in my career, I would have said, we arrest that person, right? But as it goes along, you just change one simple word. I forgot I had a fancy clicker. Address. We don't have to arrest crime. We can address crime. Addressing crime doesn't mean we have to arrest it. So it's a very simple thought process. We can't arrest our way out of the problem. If you take someone who's addicted to heroin and put them in jail for 2 years and they come back out, they're still addicted to heroin. They might be clean, but the truth is that they're at much higher risk for overdosing and dying at that point than they were when they got put into jail. So arresting our way out of the problem is not going to work. In order to reduce crime, we have to address the addiction. So I've been doing these presentations for quite a while now, and somebody that I know named Dr. Stephen Holzford, who one of the part owners, I guess, or creators of Lighthouse Recovery in St. Charles, told me that he's really impressed with the vocabulary, and I talk about mindset. I used to say addict and addicted and addiction, and now I say person with substance use disorder. And a lot of that, and I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about stigma, a lot of that goes a long way. And when somebody in a professional position uses the right language, it sends a message to anyone that's listening. And a lot more people listen and watch the police than probably we would ever like to admit. Sometimes they're watching us because they don't like us, and sometimes they're watching us because they do. But we can have an equal impact by simply addressing the issue, and that's going to reduce crime. So someone with substance use disorder is not the only victim here. So even if you change your mindset to say the person who has an opiate addiction is the victim that we're trying to reach through this service, we're missing a lot of people. People who have substance use disorder victimize family members. They victimize friends. They victimize strangers. And really it hits everyone's pocketbook. So you could look at this from a multifaceted approach. And I don't try to look at things from just one perspective. The more perspectives that you add, the better it's going to be. So we want to help the person with substance use disorder. That's why we call it We Can Help. But we also want to help their family. We also want to help friends. We also want to help the random person that may become a victim of a crime they commit. One of the many people that I've interviewed as a detective investigating crimes was someone who did some bank robberies, did a whole string of bank robberies. And by the time I actually interviewed him in the county jail, he was completely stable. He'd gone through all of his withdrawals and he was back to a baseline. And he was very candid with me about all of this stuff. And he said, man, I've stolen from and hurt my family, my friends. I was robbing banks because I needed to get high. And so the truth is, if we as the police can be kind of the catalyst to assist people to becoming stable, not only is it good for that person, it's good for society as a whole. And really, it comes down to transitioning from a warrior mindset at the police level to a serve and protect, which is what we've really always been. So really, just looking at it through that lens, we can help out society by promoting stable individuals. And that's really the baseline thought process here. So how do we address a multifaceted problem? Focus on the stigma. Again, I personally went through this in doing these presentations to different groups, to the public, to the different officers, using the language. Because if I'm standing up here and saying, hey, so we're going to help these junkies and we're going to try to get them clean, at the end of the day, you may think, oh, that's kind of a cool program, they're helping people, but you also see that I'm calling them junkies. You also see that I really am just trying to throw something at the wall and hope it sticks. If you're really gonna have institutional change, you have to actually believe in it, and you have to use the right language. So, not just say we did it, not always in the eye of the media. So, the unit I created at the police department that actually kinda is the overarching umbrella that the We Can Help initiative is under is called the Collaborative Crisis Services Unit. And we focus on mental health, substance use, and homelessness, because there's a lot of overlap, but those are the three main areas that we address, and really all of those areas come down to stigma. All of those areas come down to not just changing the way we look at it as the police, but also being the catalyst to change the way that the general public views a homeless person, a person with substance use disorder, a person who has mental health issues. So, again, we aren't doing these programs just to say on paper that we're doing something good. A lot of times when we do programs like this, people want to say, and in the social services world, you guys could really appreciate this, all right, what is your success rate? I don't know. And the reason I say I don't know is because if I help one person, that's success. And if I focus on how many people I've actually helped and how many people I have not taken my advice, then I'm gonna quit real quick. Because anyone who's spent any time examining the opiate epidemic will tell you how many times does it take someone to go into inpatient treatment before it might take effect. Somebody know those numbers?
As many times as it takes.
As many times as it takes, right? But realistically, 7 to 11 times inpatient.
Yeah.
That is amazing, right? So how many times are you gonna look at the numbers for a program and say, well, this program didn't work, it was bullshit, we quit, right? Pardon my language. So if you're gonna sit there and focus on the outcome and the results, you're never going to actually institutionally cause any change. So while I can give you some numbers, for example, we placed 15 to 20, because we don't keep strict numbers, 15 to 20 people we placed inpatient, and countless people we placed outpatient in 2018 through this program. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that is, but again, the focus has to be on changing stigma, changing thought process, and continuing to drive regardless of outcome and results and numbers. So we're not doing this so we can put up a Facebook post and say we're doing something. And if everybody's on board with that thought process, we're gonna have a successful, a situation and a successful program every day in everything we do. And that's kind of my motto. So here's a super wordy slide. So if you're reading along, have fun. Change the focus to achieve the desired goal. A multifaceted approach where arrest is an option used only when other options have failed. So one way that we're going to try to stop this and change the course and outcome of how people with substance use disorder end, which is usually in jail or dead, unfortunately, right? How can we change that outcome to something better? Well, another thing involving stigma is once somebody becomes a convicted felon, they're a convicted felon for life. Are they gonna get a job like you or I could go get a job? No, right? So absolutely, we are looking into in the Elgin Police Department, and I've already done it a little bit. Did you guys know that Illinois is one of 2 states right now that officially has on their books pre-arrest diversion laws? They actually have laws. It's Senate Bill 3023, if you wanna look that up. But they're actually putting out the framework that says, go ahead and do this. Illinois is usually the first in everything, right? No, we're usually the last in everything, but this is something we're actually one of the first states to do. And so why not? What's holding us back from doing that? And I always ask, what is your agency willing to do? Or is your agency willing to participate? And Jim and I have talked about this, and it's the community stakeholders and getting involved with the police so that we can all come together and say, okay, you know what? What does the pre-arrest diversion look like? Well, here's what it looks like to me. A patrol officer stops somebody and finds heroin on them. Clearly a user, not a seller of heroin. They then have the option, if they want, to enter that person in as a pre-arrest diversion. What would happen then is that would get filtered to me, or my unit, and we would then evaluate it, we would check past history, we would do a few different checks and balances, and we would then contact them and say, okay, here's what we're gonna offer you. Instead of being arrested, we are going to offer you an opportunity to go do an intake and evaluation with one of our service providers who's agreed to this program. And if they send me a letter saying you satisfactorily completed the programming that they gave you, that this will never enter the criminal justice system. And let me tell you just how our mindset as a police department works when it comes to this. I can tell you, especially in the early parts of my career, I arrested and turned informants on a regular basis. So why? So that we could work our way up the chain of command to get drug dealers off the street. And I was willing to, as an officer who really wanted to go out and make good felony arrests, I was willing to go out and stop somebody and say, you have dope on you, I won't charge you if you tell me who you got it from. And if we're willing to do that just for some information, couldn't we be willing to do that so that somebody could get better, right? So again, a fundamental shift in the way that we view it. So this law supports deflection. So again, the goal is to create somebody stable. Because at the end of the day, you arrest someone for a crime they committed, you have addressed that crime. If you get somebody stable, especially long-term, you have addressed future crimes. And while we're not gonna be part of the pre-crime unit, like in the movie Minority Report, we certainly can do a lot to prevent future crimes by creating stable individuals. So that's the ultimate goal. So this is based in large part on Dixon, Illinois, and Lake County. Lake County has something called a way out. Dixon, Illinois actually was the first in the state of Illinois to institute anything like the We Can Help initiative. And they did it based off of PARI. Has anybody heard of PARI? It's a Police Assisted Addiction Recovery Initiative. You can look that up, PAARI. So that actually started out in Gloucester, Maryland. And like anything, it started with some rich guy with a lot of money who suffered a loss of a loved one and said we should do something about this, and decided to rope the police in and say maybe the police can help. So Dixon, Illinois heard about that and started their own program. And talk about numbers, Dixon is way, way smaller than Elgin, and they, in their first year of operating their program, placed 24 people inpatient. We were actually very nervous when we instituted this program in Elgin, because we said if that's apples to apples, we're gonna get 300, 400 people in a year, and I don't know what we're gonna do. We didn't, which is, we're continually trying to change what we do. But is your department or agency willing to participate in pre-arrest diversion? And so what I call this is, put your money where your mouth is. And my job as the police, I say we use our powers for good, right? And the more we can use our powers for good, that's a good thing. So my job, as I view it with the We Can Help initiative, is to go to these different service providers and get them on board to say yes. Because as soon as they say yes, then I can start referring people to them. Now, from a business standpoint, that means that's more referrals. But from a human standpoint, that means that's more likely of a chance that person will actually become stable. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's how we're trying to address this multifaceted problem. So what has actually changed at Elgin PD? I've already hinted at a lot of this, but the We Can Help initiative was started at the Elgin Police Department with help. What I've found and what I've noticed, whether it's mental health initiatives or opiate initiatives in law enforcement world, or really in the social services world as well, is everybody likes to take what they've done and make it their pretty little pet and say, look what I'm doing, and this is what I'm doing, and you can't do it. Right? We all want to act like we're the first to have done something. Well, I'm going to tell you that Elgin is not the first to have done this. What we did is we took things that were being successful in other places, albeit very few places are doing it, and we made it work for the city of Elgin. So, we had a lot of help. We weren't interested in reinventing the wheel. We wanted to help people in the absolute best way possible. So we went out and visited Dixon PD because I couldn't get them to send me to Maryland. I tried. So we went out and visited Dixon PD, and we looked into PARI, and we asked for help. Any agency could do this, and yet Elgin is one of the few in the area that's even bothering to do this. And what I say is I travel to police departments all the time, and I pitch this to them and try to get them on board, because there's really no excuse to not do something like this, in my opinion. Competition and always wanting to be the first with an idea is killing productivity and progress. And so initiatives like Fuse that we use in Elgin, getting everybody at the table so that we can all stop being competitive and saying this is mine and you can't have it, and start saying, well, here's what we did that worked, maybe you guys could try it. What's working for you guys? So this initiative is just as much about cutting red tape so that we can effectively help the people that all of these agencies are trying to help, and that the police can then be the catalyst to have that happen. So I have an administrative role, but I also have a kind of what I would call boots on the ground role, where we're actually helping people as well. So in our response, we kind of created what I call a 3-tier goal of outreach to increase the chances of becoming the agent for change. How I view my job and my unit in the CCSU is to become the most effective liaison between the person needing help and the agency that's providing that help. And so we created kind of a 3-tier approach. Through trial and error, we originally started out just as inpatient, until I realized that a lot of people aren't ready for inpatient. And what I learned the hard way is something that you guys probably all know, which is that if I'm pushing, and I use rapport building to get that person to say, okay, fine, I'll go do inpatient. If they didn't want to go, and that wrong level of care is given to them, they're not going to follow through with it. They have to want it. So the first thing that we understand is that people have to want it. So we created a 3-tier approach. That tier 1 is inpatient. We forged partnerships with the SHARE program in Hoffman Estates, Abraxas, which is the umbrella company for Woodridge Interventions and several other places that have substance use treatment, LSSI, Haymarket, and we're always searching for more. So as far as our inpatient places, those are our general go-tos. With the opiate epidemic, what I also learned is that with opiate and alcohol, they have to go to detox, no questions asked. They have to go. And so the only way that I can get through that loophole is if they've been incarcerated for at least 7 to 14 days and they get out. Day 1, I take them straight from the jail and make sure they don't use and then drop them off. That's the only way I can not take them to detox. So the problem is that everybody's got to go to detox. Is there anyone here that thinks that the system isn't a little broken? Right? So how many people that we deal with have Medicare, Medicaid? How many places within a 30-mile radius for detox accept Medicare, Medicaid, right? So part of our program really is simply being the wheels to get a person to detox. So if somebody steps up and raises their hand and says, I want help, we as a police will physically drive them from Elgin to Chicago to get to detox. And with the deal we have with Haymarket, they will actually hold open beds. I mean, they pretty much always have open beds anyway. But one thing I always try to do is mentally prepare people for what they're going to get when they go to Haymarket, because it is a factory. Churn them in and churn them out. So we have to get them there though. So we do a little bit of case management, and we try to sign releases so that we can continue to talk to them and call somebody at Haymarket to find out how they're doing. And we do a little bit of case management when it comes to that. But if somebody wants inpatient, we will get them inpatient. And our goal is within 24 to 48 hours. We have never not met that goal, but usually wait periods for inpatient is 3 to 6 weeks. So we're using our powers for good to try to cut through the red tape. So if somebody says they want help, we're going to get that help for them. If they complete the program, that's up to them, right? Because it has to be voluntary. Tier 2 is outpatient treatment. That's where you guys come in. We have Ren Center, Latino Treatment Center we partner with, and anyone else who wants free advertising is what I like to say. So Dr. Stephen Holtzford is part of the King County Opioid Task Force, and he's done a lot of these presentations with me, and so he will help. He does intakes over the phone for medication-assisted treatment, and you have to have real insurance to go to him. So if I encounter someone who wants help and has real insurance and wants to do an over-the-phone intake, maybe we'll do that. But the primary referral that I give is either RENS or Latino Treatment Center, who primarily deals a lot with court-ordered stuff, but that's an option in Elgin that we want to keep sticking with as well. And then the third tier, if they're not willing to do outpatient or inpatient, is outpatient assistance is what I would call it. In-house help. We have free social services at the Elgin Police Department, and even if they aren't willing to come to an outpatient program, if we can just get them talking and start trying to address some of the underlying issues, because the vast majority of these individuals are going to have co-occurring disorders, so we can try to start addressing some issues. Counseling and help groups, churches, nonprofits, there's a bunch of different things that we'll refer people to. And here's something that you never hear from an officer. If they tell me that they're still going to keep using and they're not ready to quit, I will refer them to Point to Point out of King County, which is a free needle exchange, and I will have Jim come out with me, and we will train them in and issue Narcan to them. And if they don't want to talk to us, we will train their family members and issue Narcan to them. Because at the end of the day, any contact we have is going to end positive, even if someone slams a door in our face, because we are going to give them a different look and something else that we want them to see. So that's that 3-tier approach that we have. Additionally, officers have been trained in using Narcan. This is not something incredibly new. We've been doing this for a little while, but every single officer carries Narcan, and they're trained in it. And so each officer has 2 of the nasal Narcans, and we've had times, I can tell you, the only time I've had to use mine in the field, ironically, was at a 4th of July concert. A woman had overdosed on prescription pills, and we actually had to use like 4 or 5 Narcans on her, which was really kind of shocking. But regardless, it was 4 or 5 Narcans is what it took, and we had her revived before paramedics even got there. So we're trying to save lives, because the way I look at it, I hear a lot of people say, especially in the police world, well, aren't we just enabling by bringing people back? My point to that, again, changing the way we look at it and changing the stigma, is every time that you have an opportunity to save a life, you should. And additionally, every time that you save a life for someone who's overdosing, you give them one more opportunity. And so that's how we look at it. So partnerships have been forged in a continual effort. It is important for the whole community to work together for a common goal. So, again, the police aren't going to solve the opioid epidemic. We are very realistic with our We Can Help initiative. We know that it's not going to be us that solves the problem. It's not going to be the REN Center that solves the opioid epidemic. It's going to be everybody coming together with one goal in mind and putting all and everything else aside to say, here's what we can do to help this person. What can you do to help this person? What can you do to help this person? And engagement at all levels, including up through the chains of command so that everybody's on the same page. And I'll tell you that the chief, I don't know if she likes when I say this or not, but she gives me a ton of leeway to say and do whatever I want when I come and do presentations, because she knows that common goal is what I'm working towards. And she knows whatever I say is going to angle the department towards that. So we are absolutely on board with it, and we're trying to continue to get other people on board with it. Social Services received a grant to assist victims in crime. While the focus on the addicted person is important, we have to address the whole person. And I think that that's critically key as well, because that's why it matters that, for example, you guys have merged with the Ecker Center. That's why it matters that we have direct access to not just to address the substance use, but also whatever co-occurring disorder may be there, whether it's just depression or anxiety, or whether it's something more like schizophrenia or bipolar. We have to address the whole person, because if we don't, then we're not going to be successful. Even some outside the box stuff, such as forming partnerships with Food for Greater Elgin. We have to have people who are stable and have a source of income, as far as not income, a steady source of food. If they don't have that, then they're going to go take to get that, because somebody who's really suffering from a heroin addiction is going to go get that at all costs, and they're not going to prioritize, well, I need to eat today. No, they're going to prioritize, I need to get high right now. So if we can make sure that they have that steady supply of food, that's critically important too. Through the Fuse initiative, we work on getting people housed. A housing first model is something that we're really starting to look at, which of course has a lot of funding issues with it. But again, that backwards thinking that we always just say that, well, this is just how we do it. We do it this way because it's always been that way. That's what we've always done. Isn't going to work for this. And just when we thought that the heroin epidemic was enough, now almost all of our overdoses involve fentanyl, which is much more deadly and much less predictable and much less regulated. Not that heroin is particularly regulated, but fentanyl is certainly much less regulated. So some of the final thoughts and things to think about is spread the word and fight the stigma. Again, you can't change and help somebody, and I've seen this time and time again. There's been times where I've arrested somebody where they absolutely hate me, right? And they're very mad at what's happened to them. And there's been a lot more times, especially as my thought process has shifted, where I've arrested and charged somebody because they committed a violent crime, and they're thanking me and shaking my hand. And it all comes down to what you treat somebody like. And the stigma is what is absolutely killing this. And I hear it all the time, and it certainly wasn't this agency, but I will tell you, we just did an outreach event for the chronic homeless, and we had several different agencies out there. And one of the agencies walked away because we only had 11 people show up, which I think we only have about 30 chronic homeless, so that's actually a pretty good turnout in my opinion. And we had someone from one of these agencies say, well, at least I got 2 intakes out of it. My exact response was, well, if that's what you're here for intakes, then you're not here for the right reason, right? So again, fighting the stigma, even within our own organizations. And I will tell you, there are a lot of officers who are forward-thinking like this, and there are just as many that aren't. And Elgin is one of the more forward-thinking departments out there, but what I can tell you is if you're dealing with someone who's had contact with Chicago PD or Carpentersville or some of these other area departments that are not thinking like this, then you have an uphill battle. We have to constantly fight that stigma. So it's incumbent on each and every one of us, not just to watch what we're doing, but watch what the people in our organization are doing and saying. It's critically important. Volunteer, get your organization on board with no agenda. So when I set up the CCSU, we still, even though we've been in operation for a year, do not have a budget. We have a $0 budget. So everything that we do is free. And so what I say all the time is that I approach agencies and I say, hey, here's what we're doing, here's what I'd really like to see that we would be able to do that would help your organization, and here's what I would like out of your organization. And in doing so, RENS was able to give us Jim. I don't have to pay Jim. I think the RENS Center pays Jim. But Jim rides along with me, every other Monday roughly for about 3 hours, and we follow up every time there's been an overdose incident. And we will go and touch base with them, talk to them about where they're at in their thoughts on recovery. If they're interested, if they are, we will talk about that. If not, we will train them and issue Narcan, and we're gonna start expanding that to people charged with possession. Because we want to not only just do that pre-arrest diversion I talked about, but sometimes people end up in the system, well, we're not just gonna forget about them. A lot of times they have court mandated stuff that they just don't follow through on, and if we go make that contact and get them to do what the judge already told them to do, not only is their court case gonna get resolved sooner, but the chances that they actually get help go up. So again, we have to go with no agenda. No agenda to say, well, where am I gonna get the funding from? How is this gonna hit my bottom line? I don't have a budget, and I continue to operate in that mindset that we can accomplish this with the infrastructure we already have if we just change the way we look at it. Recognition, know what the signs of heroin abuse are. You guys probably don't have any issues with that, I would imagine. But truthfully, it used to be when I first started here that if somebody was using heroin, you would see track marks all over their arms. That is not the case anymore. We have a whole subset of heroin users who are snorting it. We have a whole subset of heroin users who are getting it in pill form now. There's a lot of different ways that this hits, and understanding some of that stuff is really key. So I'm sure most of the time when I talk to officers or the general public, we have to really talk to them about what to look for, but you guys already kind of know. Remember that every time someone with substance use disorder has system contact, that contact could be the one time the message gets through. And having that mindset again means that, I can't tell you the number of times I get a referral to my unit and they go, oh, this person's had contact with us for years, they've been suicidal, they've overdosed, they've this, they've that, you're wasting your time. But the truth is that the more system contact that somebody has, the less likely they are to actually get help. Because everybody starts to go, oh, you again, oh, nice to see you back again, I'm surprised you're alive, right? It starts to get to that point where they start to get beat down by the system. Because why? Well, that's just what we always do, right? So every time that someone has contact with the system, that gives us a new opportunity to try to help them again. I have somebody that I placed last year in inpatient 4 times for substance use, 2 times for petitioning him in for mental health evaluations, and I put him in touch out of state once for a 2.5-month stint with an inpatient facility. And he still comes into our lobby high on heroin, and he still comes in and tells me, hey, I need help. And every single time he comes in, I contact the facility and I see if we can get him in, and we'll drive him there. And the truth is, everybody said, well, we should just let this guy die. I've actually heard people say that. And people get frustrated. And so the key to something like this is not just to know that the program exists. You can refer anyone to the Elgin Police Department, and they can come in and say, hey, I need help with my addiction. I need help. They can come in and we will place them. That's important to know. The other important thing to know is that if they came in last week and we placed them and they left against medical advice and they come in again, we will place them again. And so this program, again, isn't lip service, isn't well, you have to be an Elgin resident, or you have to fit this criteria. We have never turned away anybody. So if anybody wants to come in, we will place them. And if they flake, we will not be mad at them. So it's important to understand that. So if they don't want inpatient and they kind of flake and say, well, I don't know about that. I had one guy that I've referred to, I think, 4 or 5 different places. He wanted specifically Suboxone, but he had to have it under his Medicare, Medicaid program, and I said, you know what, I think I have a good feeling up here why he wants Suboxone, but regardless, if it might work, I'm still gonna refer him, and we're still gonna get him placed for that reason. So again, that systematic approach has to be that the contact with the system is a positive contact. And anytime that you are that person who's that contact, you have direct control over whether or not that's a positive. And the way to look at that too is we can't always get people what they want. But people study the police all the time. And there was a really interesting study that was very eye-opening for me, which was that, what do you think the determining factor is in whether whether a citizen was happy with their contact with the police during a traffic stop? Do you think that it was whether or not they got a ticket? Or do you think it was whether or not they felt they were treated with respect? Right? as an officer, I assumed when I saw that study, I said, well, let me guess. I got a ticket, I'm mad about my encounter with the police, right? Or I got a warning, I'm fine with it, I'm happy with it. There is absolutely no correlation to the enforcement action taken with how they felt about the police after that encounter. It has everything to do with how they were treated. So, what does that mean for this? That means that we may not always be able to get the person the exact help they need, but if you are a positive experience for them, they're going to come away with that more likely to feel good about it, but more importantly, more likely to reach out when they do want help. They will say, hey, you know what? I had a good experience with Renz. Hey, you know what? I had a good experience with the Elgin Police. I'm gonna reach out to that officer. When I do these follow-ups, I have a lot of people tell me, well, I don't talk to cops, but I'll call you. Is what they say to me, and I'm like, should I explain to them that I'm a, you know what, never mind, it doesn't matter, right? Because the truth is, again, you have a lot more control than you think. And when I always say this, I said this yesterday at this conference I spoke at, is that be comfortable with being the least important person in the room and still making the biggest change. You're new, so I'm gonna pick on you. Be comfortable with being the least important person, because I promise you, every meeting I go to, I am the least important person in the room. And yet, I'm the one driving the agenda and saying, let's go, let's go, let's go. So, if you have that mindset, and if you're fostering those good positive contacts, you're going to have an impact on somebody. So, most importantly, if you know someone's suffering, be ready with resources for when they decide they want help. I picture like the nerdy dad who's got the fanny pack that has all the stuff in it that you would never need, and everyone's like, why are you wearing that fanny pack? You look ridiculous, right? But then all of a sudden you fall and scrape your arm, he's like, nope, got a Band-Aid, here you go, right? So think of it like that. Be ready with resources, because it's so easy to get frustrated when you're dealing with people with substance use disorder, because it's like, why don't you see what you're doing? You're destroying your friends, you're destroying your family, you can't hold a job, you're gonna die, you're gonna end up in jail. Why don't you want this help? The truth is that all you can do is continue to be that positive contact, have the resources ready, and have a game plan ready for somebody. If this person comes to me and says, I want help today, do I have a plan? What am I gonna do for them? Get Narcan to have in the house to save a life. You know, this more is not really applicable for you guys, you have that here. But even if somebody says, I'm gonna keep using it, I don't care if I die. Okay, well, who do you live with? Reach out to a family member, because I will tell you that we went out and did a follow-up visit with someone who had overdosed twice in about a week's time period. And we went up and did a follow-up with him with the Latino Treatment Center, and we trained the family and gave them Narcan, and later that day, and it was 12 hours later, the family had to use that Narcan to save their kid. So, this stuff does work, it is important, and if you think you've done enough, think, what else can I do, and do a little bit more. Because we all work within frameworks in our organizations as to what we can and can't do. We all get complacent at times, but the biggest thing with this initiative that we do is to change minds and to change lives. And so, be a positive helper without becoming a victim. And so this is not, again, not for you guys so much, but it is for anyone in the community, is you can help somebody without becoming a victim. You don't have to keep giving somebody money. You don't have to keep, you know, becoming a victim and letting them steal your things. You can assist somebody and be ready to offer help and be ready to save their life without becoming victimized. And sometimes that will happen too as a professional. You become the victim of somebody who's going to just cause mayhem and havoc for you. So again, that's kind of my final thoughts, is it's all about the thought process. But just to kind of give a very quick synopsis to end it of what the We Can Help initiative is, it's our willingness, and I mean that, our willingness to tell somebody who comes in and says, I want help, that we will get you placed in 12 to 24 hours, usually less, usually a couple hours, and we will use our powers for good to make sure that that happens, and that happens in an efficient way, and that you'll be treated with respect. We also, in the We Can Help initiative, follow up on any overdoses, we follow up on possession charges, and we will follow up on any number of things. And we're going to, again, start implementing to try to fight that stigma, so that even if somebody does get arrested and charged, we're still helping them. And better yet, if officers are willing to be another agent for change, aside from just the ones in my unit, and they're willing to refer somebody and say, hey, I think that they'd be good for pre-arrest diversion, that we implement that. And so that's what the We Can Help initiative is, and all I would ask from any agency or anyone who happens to view this is that you just sign on, whether you're important at your agency or not, and get that thought process going and make every contact a positive.